Hello and welcome to the Southbound Sports Show. I'm your host, Richie Leahy, here with my co-host, Matty B. Got kind of a live show going on as Matt is leaving practice, according to Pennsylvania. I guess it's kind of state law, right? They have heat acclimation practices where teams in Pennsylvania, they start out on Monday, which would have been yesterday, and they have to do 1 week before they're able to put the pads on. So, day 2, how's that going for you?
It's going really well. My voice isn't in training camp shape yet, but we're getting there.
Is that a bad sign because you're yelling a lot more than what you expected?
Yelling a lot more than what we did over the summer. The bear came out of hibernation.
So
we had a great turnout so far. I've been really happy with our numbers. So we're heading in a positive direction there.
I was going to ask, so do they need a physical and stuff, or is this kind of just like to get a feel? Like, do you have guys that drop out after this week, or is pretty much anyone who shows up pretty much your team?
Well, I push really hard that they have their physicals in before heat acclimation. And that way it kind of solves some of that issue. There's a little bit of grace period, but for the most part, those guys, like, they come in with their physicals because.
And I might be losing Matt a little bit.
Having a physical playing around all summer, they're definitely going to be at a higher rate of risk for injury or death. So we don't want that happening.
Well, as a coach, do you have to get in like heat shape yourself? Because it's been pretty brutal outside to even go out. I know down here in the South might be different for you. But what is your process for that?
For me, I stay active throughout summer, and I feel like with our weightlifting and stuff in the summer, we do some field work. So I also have a lot of time where I'm outside, kind of semi-conditioning for it as well. So that kind of helps take some of that pressure off. But just like the kids, the longer days of the heat acclimation, it is a little bit of an adjustment getting back into the swing of things. One thing that's different is that you're kind of capped with the amount of time that you can be out on the field. So
what happens if you go over?
Where you're having it. Well, you could end up getting in trouble with PIAA.
And that means they'll take a playoff game away or something?
Take playoff games.
Because I think something similar happened with Michigan.
Whatever but they'll not allow you to coach anymore.
Oh, they'd take your coaching? Because I think when Rich Rod did it at Michigan with the extra stretching or whatever, they ended up having to take a few scullies away. Or whatever, which kind of looks, I mean, that looks like nothing in hindsight to like some of these other teams if you're getting pinched for that. But I didn't know how that would be in high school, if it'd be any different or not.
I mean, I just try to follow whatever their guidelines are. That way we don't have to worry about it.
You don't push the boundaries, you say. You're not an Urban Meyer, per se.
I'm not kicking people, per
se. Not even as a head coach. Well, we'll keep that in mind. Because I'm going to bring that up throughout the year. Urban Meyer's words of wisdom, I bet there's a whole bunch I could find and sprinkle into the show.
You probably find them. Well, if you tune into Fox, you'll be able to watch him when he's back in the booth.
Oh, don't worry. Fox is going to be the network. We're going to talk about that later in the show. I'll tell you, I've been getting out, because I talked about it a couple weeks ago. I think I'm on week 2 now of getting outside and trying to just be active throughout the week. And man, some days it's so hot down here that like I need to change my shirt like 2 or 3 times throughout the day, depending on when I go out there. So what kind of gear do you wear? Do you wear like just a cool fit shirt? Because you can't be wearing a sweatshirt out there like you normally wear.
I do.
You don't wear a polo. You can't wear a sweatshirt, man.
Yeah, I wear one of our team football shirts. They're dry fit, and I'll wear my sweatshirt over it.
Because the other day I was like, I'm gonna go for my walk. Try to get like I try to do like a mix of jogging / walking, but at least like what have I been doing? Whatever it ends up being, it's like 5 kilometers, 6-7 kilometers or something. I've been using my Garmin watch to kind of track, and whatever my recommended is for my health range, it's like 10,000 steps or something. That's what I've been trying to do. And I went out on lunch break, and I'm like, I'll run in the food line after. And I was so drenched in sweat that I'm like, people have to look at me and wonder, like, what is that guy doing? Like, why is he so sweaty? And I'm like, I'm just picking up milk. So they're probably like, who is this? Just Jim Harbaugh out there working out all summer and then just getting a gallon of milk and coming home and drinking it? Like, what kind of diet? Like, anyone else probably looked at that and was like, I hope that guy doesn't drink that because he will be throwing up. Like, he has to get some water in. So that's been going well. I'm going to try to keep it going. I will say my legs are, like, pretty much dead at all points just because I haven't been giving myself a rest day. Because, like, my rest day is kind of just walking, you know? I'm like, yeah, I'll go walk, and I've been reading and stuff. And then just trying to keep the active, because that was one of the things my watch kept telling me. It's like, hey, your rest days are pretty much like no movement days. And I was like, well, what do you guys recommend? So I've just kind of been going with what they recommend, and we're going to see how it goes if I'm able to get in better shape. Because in the winter, I could see myself walking or at least trying to stay active more than where it gets freezing cold. I typically don't want to run because then your lungs start hurting. And I'm like, what am I doing this for? So that'll be a new thing. I'll keep you guys up to date on the show. I don't have any races signed up. And last year I did one of the Michigan ones, I think was in December, a 5K or something. So maybe we'll use that as a base point. If I stay active, do my times increase? That's going to be my thing to bring in. And if anyone has any other tips or stuff that they do to stay active, because I'm a computer guy, so I pretty much sit while I'm working. So I have to get up. This is my new push to, like, when I get a break, no more browsing like the net, looking up sports stuff. I'm going to go outside and, like, try to do it as I'm walking around. So that's my new thing. But I know the heat part is the one thing that kills me right now. I'm drinking so much more water. Like, I think I have so much more water weight that it's unbelievable.
Drinking water is good, and I like the extra weight loss getting ready for back to school time because it helps just being more active. And I know my steps, I pick up probably an extra 1,500 steps or so, or 15,000 steps through practices and stuff.
Yeah, see, that's where I used to be when I was teaching and lecturing, because, like, you pace back and forth, like, the entire time for a couple hours, and you'll be over the 1,000. That's kind of where I went for my baseline. It's like, they gave me a range. It was like 7,500 to, like, 12,000 or whatever. So I kind of picked somewhere in the upper where I was, like, before, a couple years ago, I was hitting 10,000 every day. So that's what I'm going to go for, and I'm going to try to adjust. There's been some days where I'm, like, over 15,000 just because of, like, doing more stuff, but we'll see how it goes. Some days, like last week when we did the show, it was like my first weekend, and I was so tired, and it took everything. I actually had to walk after the show a bit to hit my goal, and this week I got ahead of it, but we'll see. I'll keep posted on that. Anything else you have coming up for your camp and stuff you want to hit on before we get into the NFL stuff?
Not so much this week. It's just because it's pretty straightforward. Like, you're not allowed to have body-on-body contact. You can hit with a bag, and players can wear a helmet and shoulder pads, but it's just kind of getting used to being outside and getting a feel for what practice is like.
All right, well, so we'll check back in next week. Good luck with that. Hopefully you're running with the kids a little bit, showing them how to do the techniques. I think you should really teach them how to, like, do 100-yard sprints and stuff. That would probably help out. Visualize, like, hopefully you're out there running the routes and doing that kind of thing. Not so much quarterbacking the entire team, but that might give you some flashbacks.
There we go.
Getting to the NFL stuff, preseason has begun. Officially, well, I guess tomorrow, or not tomorrow, Thursday. When you listen to this, it'll be Wednesday. That's what I'm thinking. So Thursday, the shows will come out, or the games will come out. My God. Last week's game, last Thursday, man, was so boring that I'm thinking, like I talked about it last week, I want them to just figure out a way to either move the Hall of Fame game down so that it kicks up a full weekend of games. Like, I'm getting texts like, hey, any more games on this weekend? We're going to watch a game? I'm like, no, there's no games on. What are you talking about? They're like, oh, I thought it started on Thursday. I'm like, yeah, it did. But now we have to wait another week for no reason. And I'm like, you might as well just let me wait a week. Fantasy football, we're trying to get that together. People are asking me. I'm like, they're like, don't you normally text us? I'm like, yeah, like the first week of games, but it's kind of weird now with the Hall of Fame game being so far out in advance. I'm like, was it always like this? I don't know. Maybe I just don't remember. And I'm always used to the 4 because that gives you a month to kind of get everything planned out for fantasy football. It's nice. You send the stuff out, see who's in, set the draft, get a couple of weeks of getting some scouting in while you let people like figure out if there's any rules we need to vote on. And then right before Labor Day weekend, do the draft sometime, either that, and if something happens where there's an event or something, you can do it the week before, and then you're set. Now with the 3 week, I feel like they're stressing me out, man. And now Aaron Rodgers isn't even playing. He said, like, there's no point in me even playing a series in the game. And I gotta agree with him. Like, what would you even be doing there? Like, you might as well just rest up. If you're such a veteran, now, like, they're going to give Love some touches and really try to get him in on the offense. But, like, if you're the 49ers, because that's who the Packers are playing on Friday, you're looking at it and you're like, yeah, we're gonna give Trey Lance some snaps. And I'm like, yeah, you better. What experience does that guy really have? Not much. It's not like you're like, yeah, we might give Garoppolo some snaps. Like, no, we're not going to play you at all, Garoppolo. But, like, if I'm the 49ers and, like, even the Packers, like, if they would went with Love, that's a guy, like, you need to be in the preseason game. I don't care. They said about Herbert hasn't really played any preseason or something, and they're going to keep sticking with that. And at this point, yeah, he's been the starter or whatever. But, like, the other guys like Trey Lance that hasn't been the starter, I feel like you need to get the guy as many looks as you can because you don't want him getting into week 3 just getting torn apart and not being able to bounce back. Like, at least in the preseason, you can give him an early hook and, like, talk him down and say, like, what have you seen? Like, what kind of stuff are you making? But that's what I'm looking for. I think the Steelers can definitely benefit, too, because the Browns are in a place of fool's gold right now where they think they have Watson. Roger Goodell's like, we're pushing for at least a year minimum suspension. Which, if that's going to be the minimum, how many years are they pushing for? Are they doing 1 year and 6 games? Or whatever it was supposed to be? Like, I'm really curious to see if that gets done. And if it does, how do the Browns feel, right? Browns fans have to be like, what are we doing? Are we resetting? Because at that point, Watson's only getting older. I'm curious to see. I guess Panthers would be another team. And talking about, like, the Browns quarterback, don't they have Baker and now they have Sam Darnold? And, like, in preseason, that would be a team that I would watch. So in preseason, what basically, if you're going to look for a viewing thing, I would look at the 49ers because you can see how Trey Lance is going to do. If he comes out and he's garbage, especially if he's thrown against Love, so you got the future quarterbacks for both the Packers and potentially the 49ers on the roster. And even if they don't end up there, they could be the future quarterbacks somewhere else. So you can watch that. The Panthers, I think, is going to be entertaining because you don't know which quarterback's going to get snaps. They have so many. Steelers would be another one. I'm assuming they're going with Trubisky. And what's he look like? Are they not going to play him? Like that's another team that I would keep an eye on. But those are my must-watch teams, I think. Definitely the Packers-49ers game. And then if you can watch some of those other quarterback battles, that would be my advice for this weekend. What do you think, Matt?
I got to agree with you. I think those are going to be really good matchups, and just kind of seeing what the race is going to be like, because everything from Steelers camp is showing that Trubisky and Rudolph are kind of head-to-head, with Pickett being a distant third.
And the Steelers are playing the Seahawks, which is another team where you lose Russell Wilson. What's going to happen? That one's on NFL Network, so that kind of sucks for people that don't have that on, what is that? That's a Saturday game. So, like, for my viewing, I guess Thursday has 2 games. Honestly, it's the Giants and Patriots, which, are they really going to play much? Like, with their younger quarterbacks? Probably not. Then you have the Titans and Ravens, same type of thing. Probably not going to get much there, so you could probably skip that night. Friday night, I would definitely go with the Packers, 49ers. The rest of the games are probably meh. Unless you want to see what the Browns are doing against the Jags. That just seems like a toilet bowl to me. Actually, the Titans and Ravens have the lowest tickets right now for $3. So if you're in Baltimore and you won't have $3, Parking probably costs, $30 at least. So you're going to pay 10 times as much for parking as you would to get into the game. Unless you Uber. But that's still going to cost more than your ticket, man. You can take the whole family more than it would cost to park your car. And then the Steelers, Seahawks, like I said, I want to see some quarterback battles. What happens for some of these teams that really don't have it figured out? Because you get into them and you're wondering, where are they going to go? The Panthers play the Commanders, which is another one. That's going to be on at 1 o'clock. Doesn't really say if that's even on TV, though. Maybe because I'm local, it's just going to be my local game. That's why it doesn't have it. But those are the games that I would say to watch. Kind of the teams I've been talking about all offseason, I feel like. Because I want to see what's the next step. Like, how are you going to get to the Super Bowl? I know my man Tom Brady's going to have a great year, so would I say he's must-watch in the preseason? No, definitely not. I mean, if you want to check in and see what he's doing, he's probably not playing at all, if anything. But I want to see some of these other guys come in, battle for some spots. That's what I'm looking for in week 1. Any other thoughts you have there for the NFL? That's really all I have this week for the NFL. I just want to see more. Last Thursday left me lacking. Not going to lie.
Well, the thing that I was really considering at this point is, like, we've talked about it before. How are these stadiums not just having closable roofs? Like, with all these new buildings the new stadiums that they're building, every team in the NFL at this point should not have to have a game delayed because of rain.
Oh, I forgot about that rain delay.
Like, that threw things for a loop, because you always get caught in those, like, what time are they actually going to get out on the field? Because then that takes away from some of it. And what kind of surprised me for the Raiders was that how much they were using Jacobs, because with him being their big ball carrier last year, it seems like they're kind of showing his value to try to potentially trade him away, maybe.
Well, wasn't he hurt?
He was banged up a bit, but I mean, he ran well.
Well, I thought that he got hurt last year, and this was kind of them trying to see, like, how he healed, you know. But maybe I'm thinking of someone else. But yeah, he did play well, and that was one thing that did stand out to me is, like, man, why is he even in the game? He broke like a 10-yard run, and they were focused on Walker, the Jaguars' like first-round pick, and they were like, look at the penetration he got on this run. I'm like, yeah, but the guy's running 10 yards downfield the other way. Like, I know that's who you want to talk about when the Jaguars are on defense, but, like, come on, guys. Is there nothing else you can show? And then he got that one penalty. I guess he had the sack, but then there was the one where he clocked him in the helmet and got the one roughing the passer penalty, and they're like, oh, man, if only he learned not to do that. Like, can't wait. I'm like, he hasn't learned not to hit the quarterback in the head? What are you talking about? So I'm not really, so, like I said, he came into the draft when he go at number 1. I wish he would have showed more on Alabama, you know, when they can't double him. He did do well. It looked like getting pressure. But again, it's preseason. They might have just been doing vanilla reads. Who knows? So something to keep an eye on. But it wasn't like a catastrophe for them. I was kind of confused on why they were like, oh, he's really raw. Like he needs to learn these things, like not hit the quarterback in the head. And I'm like, yeah, but he's the number 1 pick. Like, you can say he's raw and stuff, but, like, you shouldn't be committing penalties. That was the one thing that kind of stood out to me is, like, they're trying to play it off like he just doesn't understand the game yet. But he's been playing it for a long time, so I didn't get that part. What else? Yeah, the rain delay. I don't know, man. I like the open stadiums. But you're right. If there is a storm or something, I'd rather have the game not delayed. But I also don't want them to, like, close it for snow. Because I feel like that would be a thing that happens. Like, players are like, yeah, I don't want to play in the snow. But I'm like, the fans want to see that, though. And if you have the collapsible roof, I feel like we're not going to see snow games anymore. But maybe that's just me. Anything else you had?
No, I think the snow game still could bring that element. I just, as an NFL, like, person would be interested for league issues, I think it would make sense. Like, oh, you're playing us in a cold weather area, like that plays to your advantage. Open it up, let it snow. Like, and I think at one point Minnesota was doing that, where like now, like playing in a snow game doesn't necessarily set off what your game, when your kickoff is, because when you're looking at like people coming to games and the participation and even the TV stuff, if they're delaying it, people are leaving. They're like, well, I'm not dealing with this. Going somewhere else, and it takes away from the live experience.
I think we kind of talked about it last week, but with some of the live stuff, it's like I would be afraid of them like trying to manipulate the field to give themselves an upper hand. Then we talk about like growing the grass out to slow the other team down or something. Like now you're like, well, we got this air raid team coming in, really passing over the field. Let's open the roof up, get some snow and some rain in here. And it's like, oh yeah, we'll really take advantage of that. Or you just end up building your team to build in the elements, but then on the other hand, if you don't get the weather you need, then what are you doing? I feel like I do like the gamesmanship though, because I always complain about the NBA where it's like, hey, yeah, everyone talks about like, look at these guys, like they barely miss shots. I'm like, yeah, but all they do all day is shoot the ball. They shouldn't really be missing. They're like shooting so much better in the NBA than college. I'm like, yeah, but they're taking classes and doing all this other stuff. So yeah, it's going to be a little bit different. But like in the NBA, everything's so controlled. I almost wish some teams could be like, no, we're going to play outdoors and like on blacktop as like our alternative court, and just to see how they do. Because like college basketball has been played like on cruise ships and stuff. Like do that for the NBA. Like let them mix it up and have like a mixed outdoor wood type stadium. Maybe the condensation would be so bad, but I would like to see them mix it up because like tennis players do it all the time. Let them pick. You don't have a real explosive team, make them play on clay. Like, let's see LeBron. How's LeBron get down the court like on that? Like, I want to see like a little bit of a mix-up, you know? Because they talk about how, oh, well, you know, the hardwood really hurts these players' knees. Once they get so many minutes, they're pretty much done. Right? You keep hearing about that with LeBron. Like, oh, he's getting close to the minutes where it's going to be all downhill. Just it's basic science. It's like, well, if the wood's that bad, mix it up. Clay's softer, right? That's what they always talk about for tennis. Have a clay court. What's the difference? Have a blacktop one. That blacktop would be harder. They want to get rid of flopping, though. That's always been my argument. Put a blacktop. No one's flopping on blacktop, right? You're not going to get up and your elbows all ripped to shreds. You're like, man, not again. That'd be different techniques. It's like, yeah, we got to put this guy in. He never plays, so they're like, he's in. Watch for the flops. Watch for the flops. He like all bandaged up. Has like 5 shooting sleeves on. That's add some gamesmanship to it. That would make it more interesting to me. If tennis can pull it off, basketball and other sports can pull it off. Because then like even dribbling would be a little bit different. And like, oh yeah, now you're getting into these different courts. And then they always argue like, well, this guy's the best guy on grass or on clay. In basketball, I think you'd have the same thing. Like, oh, this guy's the best ball handler. Like Allen Iverson was the best on clay, baby. And then I think that would like, instead of just saying Michael Jordan's the best, it'd mix it up, right? Because other people would have different games, I think.
I guess.
NFL kind of has it. Well, I guess maybe. Do they all have artificial turf now? I mean, back in the day, you had the AstroTurf, which was way different because I played on that. Have you played on that? I can't remember if you played down at Mansion when they had that or not.
Yeah.
But that was like, you're like running on air. Like, you can go so much faster on that I'm like, yeah, no wonder they had the greatest show on turf and stuff like that. Like, that was a real thing. And if you're not used to it, then you're like slipping around a little bit almost. So that'd be my thing. Anything else you have for the NFL?
No.
Yeah, I don't know how much we're going to go on this show. I mean, it's the first one. I'm exhausted because practices and stuff going down with like help looking at like volunteering with the local football groups and stuff like that. Had practice tonight. And I know you started, so we'll see how long we go. I think most of the NFL stuff is just getting ready for preseason. And there's been some early injuries and stuff, though. Like Sean McVay, before he transitioned to college, he signed an extension, which he announced that he signed it. But, like, what kind of coach announces their own deal? And then, like, I didn't even see any specs on it. Like, what did he tweet it out? I thought that was a weird announcement. And then some players are asking for trades already, like Raquan Smith. It's like, buddy, you didn't even play a game. But I mean, I guess once you get the things in. The big thing we're going to talk about for college is the TV deals, because that's getting close to being done. But before we get in there, they released the coaches poll. And Alabama's number 1, Ohio State's number 2, and Georgia's number 3. What a surprise. The 3 teams that have been recruiting better than everybody are now the top 3 teams coming in. Then you have Clemson, Notre Dame, Michigan, all teams that have been in the playoffs recently. Clemson won it. Then you have your group of unknowns, Texas A&M and Utah, followed by Oklahoma and Baylor. Which Oklahoma, their coaching staff seems to be a mess. Did you see that incident that they had?
Yeah.
With Gundy? So ESPN, whoever works for them, like writing headlines, they have to do this on purpose. It was like, Gundy resigns at Oak. And I was like, oh my God. They abbreviated. Like, was that supposed to say Oklahoma State? Did Gundy, like, he's the head coach. What the heck? I like Mike Gundy. So I'm clicking on it. And I was like, what a bunch of clickbait. Who the heck's Cal Gundy? Is like his brother or something? I didn't even know he had a brother. And then I was like reading the statement, and they said that he dropped what I assumed to be the N-word, right? Because they said it was racially charged. And he said that he grabbed an iPad and he read something that a player had written during he made it seem like that they were watching film or working out. A player was goofing around, wrote something on his iPad. He picked it up and read it out loud without like processing what he was reading, realized he made a mistake and apologized, and then resigned. But then Venables comes out and is like, yeah, you actually said it 13 times. And I was like, 13 times? At least that's what their insider said. And I'm like, 13 times is a very specific number. I guess Venables' statement said that he said it multiple times. It didn't give a number, but one of their insider reports, I think, said that the coaches said that it was 13. And I was like, that's not a mistake then. Like, unless he had like a rap song or something, he was like reading a whole thing, but to say it, any word that that wouldn't be a mistake, right? So I'm like, I want to, like, what's the real story? And it just seems so weird because it happened right before, I guess they don't have like a preseason in college, but he's like the offensive coordinator for a system that's kind of brand new. He's been there. He worked for Bob Stoops, which I didn't realize. He's been at Oklahoma for a while. So you want that continuity. You bring Venables in. Hey, let's focus on the defense. You handle the offense. Our offense has been great. And then right before the season, you're like, yeah, our offensive guy just resigned, though. So now I'm not so sold on them being number 9. I don't think you can come in with a new coach and have all those issues and say, yep, we're the best in the Big 12. Because they have them ranked the highest. Baylor's right behind them at 10, and Oklahoma State's right behind them at 11. But that was my main thing. It's like, as you look at other teams and like if you're a fan of a team, that's the one thing you don't want to see happen is an internal issue like that right before the season. Because that could ruin your locker room. Because one of the reports said that the players had a vote and they wanted to keep him. Like they accepted his apology. And then if the coach steps in and says like, no, it's like, all right, well, what's the truth that happened here? Because
then that almost seems like maybe there was a rift that was something that it was enough of an issue that they could push him out.
Because his wife said something too, like, well, the truth will come out because some of these aren't true. And like, I'm just reading what the report said. Like, I don't know. I'm just making my guess of what the word is based on what the players have said. And for him to read it one time, that made sense. To resign was kind of weird, I thought, though. But then to see that it could have been multiple times up to 13, I'm like, well, that's kind of not a mistake, right? Unless, yeah, I don't even know. Like, what the heck? Like, you would have to... I feel like if you made a mistake like that and wouldn't the color just drain from your face, like, immediately and you'd be like, oh, like, what did I do? Not, like, just keep going. And then, like, a George Costanza, like, did I do something wrong? Like, I feel like that's just bad move.
Just got him so fired up that it was just like... reading it, getting angrier and angrier and
yeah,
angrier.
just yelling.
Like,
that's probably
not
what happened.
justifying it, but just seeing one.
But getting back to like the coaches thing, I think that's where you really take your turn. I know a lot of teams have made the playoffs going farther down the ranking list. I mean, Michigan was unranked last year. Realistically, that was pretty much due to COVID, though. If they had played a full season the year before, I really don't think they would have been unranked, right? They had to cancel a bunch of games because COVID, and then they were 2-4. They didn't even play half their games. So I just think that there were a lot of unknowns. But knowing what Michigan had coming back, I feel like they should have been in like the 20-24 range, somewhere back there. Definitely not unranked, as we saw where they made their run. Now they're number 6. I wonder what team from farther down is going to make that run, because typically you need a team high. Like you need a Clemson like the ACC has, where if Clemson's bad this year, it might not matter depending on who they lose to. Like if they can beat Notre Dame, even if they lose 4 ACC games, that trickle-down effect is going to bump Pitt or NC State, some of these teams that are in the teens, Wake Forest. It might bump them up all the way to the top. The one comical thing to me was Texas got a first-place vote, Matt, and they came in at 18. Who in their right mind would vote Texas at number 1? Like a coach's poll. Like, did he vote for himself?
Yes.
Because if he did, why wouldn't every coach vote for themselves? Could you imagine if the whole pool just said 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, like the whole way down? Because that would be hilarious, right? I guess, do they know? The AP, they release that one ranking thing that you can click on and see who voted for what. But here, I don't think you do. Because isn't it speculation? Yeah. Like, they speculated that, like, Michigan State and some of the Big Ten teams voted Michigan down the year. What they split with Nebraska, where if they if Michigan wouldn't have got so many lower votes, they would have been number 1 in both polls. And they're like, wonder who voted them down. Was it Joe Paterno? Like, there's been like that thing of, who's the guy that voted them way lower than everyone else as undefeated? Like, that's BS, you know? Was it someone that they really crushed that year? I don't know. So here it's like the same thing. It's like, who's voting for them? Like, Kansas? Kansas vote for them so that when they beat them, they get that number 1 bump? And someone said that they're like, really can't vote Texas number 1 until they can beat Kansas. I'm like, Texas has been losing to Maryland, Kansas. Like, it's not like a typical thing where it's like a 1-year thing where it's like, who'd Michigan lose that one? They lost to Rutgers with Brady Hoke that 1 year. It's like now with Harbaugh, they haven't been close really to losing to Rutgers. I know they played some closer games, but like Texas is actually losing to some of these teams multiple times, like Maryland back-to-back, Kansas back-to-back. You can't lose to Maryland and then watch them lose by 50 to Ohio State and then be like, well, I guess Maryland really wasn't that good, but we got to bump Texas up, right? It's like, why are they losing? Like, Kansas is bad. That would be like, that should be your 70-point win where you're kind of just walking all over them and you're like, we're going to out-talent you. And if you're losing to them, you can't even say like Kansas has like a great coaching staff, right? I mean, they had all kind of their own issues with like Les Miles getting fired and all this stuff. They've kind of been a mess, and yet they're still beating you? Like, what is wrong with you? That's what I say. I think I missed Miami, too, when I read those teams. What do you think? ESPN did I don't know, what did I send you? Was it CBS? They did the best team in each state, and they had UCF as the best team in Florida, but I don't see them ranked here, Matt. What do you think of that? Do you think they're the best team in Florida, or do you think it's Miami?
Well, I think it's a show me, because you have Miami that's in transition, you have Florida that's in transition, you have Florida State that has not shown that they're back. I think the potential there is Florida State. If Jordan Travis stays healthy, look out, dog.
Fans are yelling right now as they listen to the show, and they're like, oh my gosh, he's predicting Florida State to win the ACC again.
I didn't say they were winning the ACC last year. So there are steps in the right direction. I wanted them to be bowl eligible last year. I think they
were they bowl eligible
the ACC this year. No, they were close.
Don't lose your voice. Your kids will be like, we can't hear you. What were you yelling about last night? Florida State was supposed to be bowl eligible last year. I don't know why I kept bringing it up on the show. They'd be like, oh, I guess that's it. Because they played Duquesne. Do you think that's all a gimme?
If I learned anything, there are no gimmies. Although I felt a little bit back, so I'm like, I want to see him score 100 against Duquesne, even though that's a Pennsylvania team. Like, just go back to no mercy. Tag them.
The most Florida State thing would be to lose to Duquesne, then beat LSU, and then lose to Louisville. And then you're like, what the heck? What are we doing?
Oh, yeah.
And then you'd beat Wake Forest or NC State or Clemson or someone else, and then it's like you end up 8-4 with like some head-scratching losses and some big wins, and you're like, what happened this year? That's my prediction. Maybe I'm wrong, though. Maybe they'll just end up going 3-9 or something crazy. I'm not sold on LSU. I'm not sold on LSU. I'm telling you. LSU's predicted as a 71% favorite. Florida State has been playing Notre Dame. They know Brian Kelly's stuff. I feel like even though it's different coaching staffs at Florida State or whatever, when you're in the same conference, you kind of learn the coach and you're able to just go ahead and apply that and see what happens. And so that's going to be my thing. Like, I think it's going to be, I think it's at the Superdome, right? It's not even at LSU Stadium. So that's right. A bump in Florida State's favor. And then you're playing them right after you play a cupcake, which should have Florida State coming in confident. I could see them beating that one and then losing to Louisville or Boston College and then being like 3-1 or 2-2 or something and being like, what are we doing? But I think the LSU win could pull some of that shine off the SEC, so I want to see it happen. Maybe I'm wrong, but I don't know.
As well.
That's going to be LSU's first game. So, like, Florida State, they already had that early game against Duquesne because they're playing the opening whatever. The ACC has their weird thing. So, Florida State's opening their season early, and they're playing on, what the heck even is it? Is it a Thursday? No, it's the Saturday. So they're playing Duquesne that first, the Saturday the 27th on 5 p.m. on the ACC network. And then that should be their warm-up to go play LSU. LSU's not playing anybody, so that's another bump in Florida State's favor. That's the one thing that I want to see, like, how are you going to take that? And that's really going to be a tide turner in terms of, like, conference strength. Because typically that first week or two, it's whenever you look at the schedule and you're like, hey, what are some big cross-conference matchups? I want to see what happens. That first weekend is all gimme games. Like you had, like I mentioned, the Florida State Duquesne. Illinois plays like Wyoming. If like Wyoming beats Illinois, most people aren't going to care because it's Illinois. I think the only big time matchup is Nebraska and Northwestern, which if Nebraska loses, look out. I don't know how Scott Frost isn't already feeling the pressure. I wouldn't be surprised if they lose the first couple of games that he's gone midseason. You heard that here first. I don't think that he would make it through the year if they start off with a couple of losses. Because, like, look, you lose to Northwestern, you play UND, which would be like, what, North Dakota, right?
Yep.
So they're playing the Fighting Hawks, and then they're going to play Georgia Southern. Then they play Oklahoma, Indiana, Rutgers, Purdue. They realistically should lose to Oklahoma. I mean, unless Venables' locker room is a complete mess, and then you have the path to run through what should be the easier Big Ten teams until you get down through November, where you play Minnesota, Michigan, Wisconsin, and Iowa, where you could theoretically end the season on 4 losses pretty much and go like 7-5. But you have to get, I don't know what he has to reach. He's played everyone close, which is also, it's kind of like a dagger. You can't play everyone close and say you lose all these close games, but like, why are you playing all these close games against even weak teams? Blow some teams out, Scott Frost. Take that next step. I could see them losing, starting like 2-3, and him being gone. Heck, if they lose to like Oklahoma, Indiana, and Rutgers, I think he's gone. even if he beats Northwestern. I don't know. I just don't see how he gets through all those games, and they let him go into November if he doesn't have a bowl game locked up, right? I don't think he should be battling, hey, yeah, you need to really fight. And he's like, I can't really get a bowl game because all these last month, all these games are really tough. It's like, no, buddy, you should have had the bowl game locked up already. That's how the schedule was set up for you. You're not playing Penn State. You're not playing Ohio State. You only got Michigan in the crossover, and your other crossover game is Rutgers and Indiana. Like, what are you doing? What are you doing? You got pretty much a golden goose here. I mean, you could have got the trifecta of Rutgers, Indiana, and Maryland, but you barely missed that. Good bowl eligible. That's what I would tell him if I was AD. Like, I don't know what to tell you, buddy. But that's the one, to me, that's like, you're looking at that first week. The second week, we got the backyard brawl, which we're going to get into. But other than that, there's not really that many major, or I guess is that the same weekend? No, it's the actual kickoff. You got the backyard brawl on Thursday. But like the big LSU, Florida State, there's not that many other major crossover games this year, unless you consider a game like TCU, Colorado, that first weekend. So that's going to be a big thing on what's going to turn the tide in terms of conference strength. You also have Oregon and Georgia, which would be the other one. I want to say that's it. Unless I'm missing somebody. Oh, Notre Dame, Ohio State, but Notre Dame's independent, so I don't know if that one really matters. But those would be the three, like from that opening week, like that opening weekend thing, or Clemson, Georgia Tech, but that's in conference, and that probably won't matter anyway. So what happens between Notre Dame, Ohio State, Florida State, LSU, Georgia, and Oregon? I guess Utah plays Florida too, but that's more of a lower. And then I think that's where you can really set and say, this conference looks like they're ahead in terms of conference playoff bids, and this team's behind. That's barring like an NC State loss to East Carolina or something that would kind of really throw a wrench in some of these conferences, like the Pitt Western Michigan game last year, where it's like, well, I guess Pitt's out of it. Then November rolls around and they're like, man, Pitt really blew it back then. They could have been right in the playoff talk. What are they doing? Who would have known that they would have been in the ACC driver's seat late in the year like that? But that's what I'm waiting for. That's coming up. Coaching pool. I really don't think there's really going to be a change in the AP. I think you got the three big schools, Alabama, Ohio State, and Georgia. Until other schools can string together, like A&M put together some recruiting classes, or I guess that one big recruiting class, string it together. Notre Dame seems to be head and shoulders above everyone next year, I think it is. Multiple years. You can't just do 1 year. You got to do multiple years in a row, unless you catch a quarterback lightning in a bottle like Clemson and LSU did. And that's what I think other teams like Georgia, who knows? Maybe their quarterback playing hot last year was the reason they won the national championship. If he doesn't play hot, do they get past Alabama? They lost to him the first time, you know? So that's what I want to see. And until NILs really kick in, I really don't think you're going to see a team like Oregon or whatever make the jump. Maybe Oklahoma, but again, Oklahoma's going from an easy conference into the SEC. What would make me think that they're going to do better there? Like, I really don't think if you're an Oklahoma and Texas fan, like, you have to look and see, like, hey, how did A&M do? Like, they might have did a little bit better because recruiting bumped up. Texas and Oklahoma are already recruiting at such a high level. They're not going to get the SEC recruiting bump, but they are going to get the tougher schedule. So how is that going to play out for them? Are they going to get Nebraska? Because that's kind of what happened in Nebraska, right? Get the tougher schedule, recruiting stays the same, and you're like, why are we losing with all these top recruits? Like, what are we doing? Why can't we win the West? Like, why can't we win the West? They have to be scratching their head. I don't know. What do you think? Anything looking at the preseason prediction polls that you're looking forward to?
I want to see the way that the expansions have been going, because I think as you look at some of the way that the TV markets have gone, I think that also is going to factor into the attractiveness of some of these schools. So when you look at like an SMU that is reaching their NIL to pay their players like what $34,000 a year, something like that, and you have Florida State in that competitive matchup with LSU. Like, can you blow the doors off of them? Does that make them a little bit more attractive as a Big Ten potential landing spot compared to going to the SEC?
Well, see, the big thing that I had to talk about, basically the last big topic of the show, I saved it for the TV deals with the Big Ten, because it's pretty much coming down to an NFL-like structure. ESPN, so get this, on ESPN's own website, the article said, ESPN's sources say that they dropped out of the Big Ten negotiations, right? Which means their sources on their own website is what, them? It's like they were like, hey, Rittenberg, we know you're right for the Big Ten. We need you to write this article. Who's the sources? Like, we are. We're not going to get the Big Ten. Like, we're not going to be able to match it. So I guess the Big Ten gave them what is reportedly like a fourth-term deal that was like $380 million, but it looks like the Big Ten's locking in for only 6 or 7 years, which is smart because they've been playing these. The ACC is scheduling out this long television deal till 2036 or 2036, where it's like, hey, you're not going to get any bumps if the playoffs expands. You're not going to get any like weird money extra from that. Like if you can get more marquee matchups, the Big Ten's like, no, we want to expand. And I think the smart thing that a lot of people didn't realize is they laugh about that alliance. That alliance killed ESPN's control of the college football playoff. So a lot of people don't seem to realize that, but ESPN has locked up. They have the rights for the college football playoff until like what, 2025, I think.
Yeah.
When that alliance came together, there was an extension where if they would have expanded the playoffs, it would have locked ESPN in as the sole TV, whatever, for like whatever it ended up being. And so the Big Ten and like the ACC and them, they were like, no, we don't want that, because all ESPN does is talk about the SEC all day long. Like realistically, right? So the Big Ten's like telling these other conferences, like, look, they're not even promoting you. Why would you want to do a deal with only them? And it looks like they might have abandoned the Pac-12 and the ACC now, but it was smart because now the Big Ten's network deal looks like they signed the deal with Fox. Fox is going to get their pick, and they want the noon game like they've been doing, the big noon. Now it's looking like CBS is going to keep their 3:30 slot that used to be the SEC game, is now going to be another Big Ten game. And NBC now wants to take their Notre Dame game that was typically like at 3 o'clock. Some of them were at 7. And they want to turn it into like their Sunday night football. They want to do a Saturday night football game and then a Sunday night football game. So their Saturday night game is pretty much going to be the 7:30 Big Ten matchup is what it's looking like right now, which is almost like the NFL on the same exact thing, where you have CBS at 1, Fox at 4 or whatever, and then NBC at 7. You're going to kind of have them flipped with CBS and Fox. Fox will go first on Saturday. But you're going to get this. Guess what you don't need? Cable. Those NFL games, you buy an antenna, you don't have to pay for them. The SEC deal on ESPN, guess what? You're going to have to pay for cable or at least streaming. I've heard some people complain that the streaming deal for the Big Ten hasn't been decided. What if it's on Peacock? Peacock costs $5. ESPN just doubled theirs to what, $10 now? Right? I mean, if you're going to pay, why not go for the cheaper one? And then Amazon's not out of it. So what if it's already on an Amazon Prime like it is for NFL Network? Where if you already have Prime, you're not really paying anything extra anyway. I don't know what Prime is. I think it's coming on now. But maybe it's going to be like $10 a month. But we'll see what happens. Amazon, stop. So we'll see what happens. I don't know what the stupid thing is talking about, what their Prime thing is, but I don't know what the dollars are per month. But that's going to be something where it might be cheaper than ESPN. I don't know. Might be more. But in terms of like getting the sports games, I really like how it's going. And it's something I've been pushing for. I want more Big Ten games on regular TV. I don't want to have to pay for cable. I see a lot of people commenting like, I already pay for YouTube TV. I really hope this doesn't mess up me watching the Big Ten. It's like, buddy, you don't have to pay for YouTube TV anymore. You can watch every Big Ten game for free on your TV with a regular antenna. Like, that's a game changer. That's why I'm hoping that for the college football playoff, I don't want to have to watch a crappy ESPN stream to watch a national championship game or big Michigan play Georgia in a playoff game where there's like lags and commercials and the stream crashes and stuff like that. I want the actual game to just be on TV. Like, that makes it so much better. Like, I had no trouble watching any NFL game I wanted to last year. The only trouble I had is watching some SEC games and ACC games on ESPN that were blacked out for some God knows reason. But like, for you, what do you think? I don't know if you have cable and stuff, but
I mean, I have a variety, but I mean, the thing that sucks is that a lot of the stuff goes through that ACC network. That's like, you got to have an extra package and an extra package and an extra package to see the games that you really want to see.
That's what I want to see how it shakes out with the Big Ten, because if they do put, because right now I've complained about the Big Ten, like for hockey, and like people are saying, oh my gosh, this is going to kill Big Ten basketball because ESPN's not going to promote them. And I'm like, what are you talking about? CBS does the NCAA tournament. Do you think that, what do they do? Call ESPN and say, hey, who should we put in the tournament on our 3-hour CBS, like whatever their bracketology show is? ESPN has nothing to do with that. ESPN right now only controls college football, but by not extending the playoffs, it looks like they're going to get out of it. Now in the future, you might have an expanded 4 playoff weekend or whatever, where there's 4 games, just like the NFL, where you get one on Fox, one on ABC, one on NBC, and one on CBS, because you know they're not going to put one game on paid ESPN if the other 3 games are free, right, in the playoffs, because they don't do that for the NFL. Or do they? Do they put one on ESPN? I can't even remember. I think the only ESPN one is what, the Monday Night Football game these days?
Yeah.
And they paid a ton for it. And now, in terms of revenue, they've said that the NBC game makes the most money because it's the most watched on Sunday night, which makes sense because they can show ads. ESPN, like when I'm streaming on there, they show me the same 3 ads. And now I'm starting to get Spanish ads. And I don't even speak Spanish. So how would I know what the ad is even for? And I'm like, how are they even showing this? Like, what company's paying for this? And what is ESPN telling them, like, who's viewing it? Because it has to be, you might as well just put a 0 for my household, you know? And why am I getting the same Spanish ad? Because I don't have any idea what it's saying. But that's what the best they can get for their streaming.
We said that you learn how to speak a foreign language.
But
it'd be like a free Rosetta Stone.
I can tell you what happens in the commercial because I've seen it. Like, you know how you watch a show and like 15 times it's the same commercial? It's like a Geico where you have like a gecko that's really big, and then you have the Spanish commercial where they're like, it's like a family, and then they take a card. I think it's Chevrolet, because I think he pronounces Chevrolet with like, he pronounces it different. And I was like, wait a second, does that mean in Mexico they pronounce Chevrolet different? So maybe they are trying to brainwash me. Maybe they're changing the name from Chevrolet to, and I can't remember how the guy says it, and I don't want to embarrass myself on the show. Maybe next time I'll try to find a clip of it and I'll play it. But it's not Chevrolet. And I'm like, have I been saying it wrong all this time? Is this voiceover dude? My mind's playing tricks on me now, man, as I watch the commercials. That's what I think. But I think I want to see the streaming figured out. Because if they open it up and they're like, hey, now you don't have to pay for Big Ten Plus extra to watch this hockey game. If they're just like, hey, go to Amazon Prime or whatever, which I'm probably going to set my thing off again, then it would just go ahead and my game will be right there. Or, hey, go to Peacock. And I complained about it for the Olympics because they added half the stuff to the Olympics app and then half the stuff was on Peacock. NBC just needs to go ahead and put everything on Peacock if they're going to do that to me. Right? It's either on NBC or it's on the Peacock app. Don't make me download another separate Big Ten app. And then when I click on it, it says, oh yeah, you're supposed to be in the Peacock app at this time. Because that's what the ACC kind of does. And I'm like, then I finally get into it and it's like, oh, you're trying to watch NC State? You fool. That game's blacked out. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I just spent 5 minutes figuring that out. And I still can't watch it. And then I have to go find some other stream of it if I want to, which is whatever. Some illegal stream or something is what you have to do. Really? It's like, why am I going through all this trouble? Because it's not like you can stream Raycom or whatever the ACC deals with these days. I think it's Raycom still, isn't it?
Yeah.
Unless they're on YouTube TV now or something. But it's big. This will be a game changer for the rest of the college football, because now you're really looking at it where the Big Ten's on 3 major networks, taking the shine off of, remember whenever they would just slobber all over SEC on CBS? Now they're not going to do that, right? Why would CBS and NBC talk up the SEC when they don't play their games at all? So you're going to have 3 networks now talking up the Big Ten, and people are like, well, what if ESPN just ignores the Big Ten? I'm like, you can't ignore the most watched teams. If the most watched game every year is Michigan and Ohio State, what's ESPN going to do? Not talk about it? Like they used to be the picks, remember, where Fox would get a pick, ESPN would get a pick, Fox would get a pick. Now they're like, it's going to be what? Fox, CBS, NBC gets a pick. Like, I want to see how many games are actually on each network, like for Michigan versus Ohio State versus Penn State. Now you're also picking USC. Are you also going to pick between Nebraska? Who else? Like, what are they going to be the big squads? UCLA? Are they going to start getting more primetime picks? Because if you're thinking about it, if like some of those teams have to play each other. So if Penn State and Ohio State play and they get picked at Fox, and then Michigan and Nebraska play, or like USC plays on like you or Notre Dame or something, and then like what's the night game? UCLA? Like, who do you pick? Like, there's going to be some weird games, like weeks where that matches up, and then you're picking whatever team you want. They can't just keep showing the same teams all the time. And the rest go to what? Fox Sports 1?
Yeah, I guess.
I'm excited for it, though. And I think it opens up, too, for like, I feel bad for Pitt. They might end up getting left behind. But like I've said before, if the SEC and ESPN want to stop it, they have to jump and kind of expand, because otherwise they're going to be stuck in the southeast part of the United States. Most of the population is in the Big Ten footprint now. If SEC doesn't grab Florida State and Miami in them and Clemson and really close them off, and they let the Big Ten nab Miami and Florida State as like a package or something, that's an idiotic move, right? Because now the Big Ten can just say, oh yeah, we're in pretty much every major state except for Texas. And then what's the SEC going to do? Grab Baylor and TCU and like all these other ones? Because there were some rumors where they're talking about, hey, what if the Big Ten, there's been some rumors that they might grab TCU, even though they're like a small Christian school. They're in Dallas. And someone like Fox might want that Dallas like network. And I'm like, well, they are called Texas Christian, so they are technically a big Texas school. Maybe they grab them in Texas Tech or something. And then, like, if you're already in a big national thing where all your games are on regular TV, are people going to forget about the SEC? Because isn't ESPN losing viewers every year? I feel like they cut half their staff all the time. Doesn't it seem like that?
Yeah.
I feel like every year we have a layoff talk where ESPN lays off like hundreds of people. So it's not like they're going to be, hey, SEC, don't worry, we're going to give you more extra money. I feel like the SEC, when their term's over, because it starts in 2024, I feel like whenever it's over, like I don't know how long their deal is, but is the SEC still going to be winning championships? Because at some point with the NILs, if the money swing is so much bigger in the Big Ten and they're actually paying players now, that could be the death knell for the SEC. And that's my final thing that I'm going to talk about, because if all the best players are going to play in the Big Ten, because that's been what's happening for the SEC, right? Everyone comes to the SEC now because they're the best players, they have the best teams, they have the most championships. If that flips this decade, what would ever flip it back to the SEC? I don't know if there's anything that could. Unless those teams join back up with the Big Ten, you know? And then it would be weird if there was one major conference called the Big Ten and had like 40 teams in it or something. It would make zero sense, right? That's why I'm like laughing, because like even Oregon, like Phil Knight's like, hey, there's rumors that he's offering like donations of major money to join the Big Ten, where he'll be like, yeah, and Nike will be like the official outfitter for the Big Ten and all this stuff, because he's like super old, I guess. I don't even know how old he is, but that's the rumor, is that he's like, I want to make sure Oregon's taken care of before I retire or whatever. And if that's how he does it, maybe he is retired. But if he gets the Oregon in and they're like the official Nike conference, like Wouldn't that make all these other conferences like mad? They're like, well, we pay the Big Ten schools double what you guys get. But if you don't like it, you can go to Adidas or Under Armour. Are they still around? UCLA had trouble with them, so we don't know. But that's where I'm at with it. That's what I want to see happen. I want to see the money come to the Big Ten. And they've been bold. I want to see them keep getting bolder, add some Florida teams, add Georgia Tech, add some Texas schools. Like I said, hell, call up Texas A&M first and say, are you really liking this SEC? They just added Oklahoma and Texas, and you were trying to get away from those guys. You can come join us. We're going to add Florida State, Miami, and Georgia Tech, and Notre Dame. And Texas A&M. That would be a hell of a conference, man. And I would love to see it. That's my final thing. You have anything else for this week?
No, I think it would be interesting to have that happen. Initially thought, maybe SEC would be better geographically, but if they're going to reach out, and they've already shown that they're expanded out to the West Coast, to have that southern, they can hit all the geographic points. That just would strengthen the conference as a whole. So it makes total sense.
And I just want the games to just be able to be watched. People are so worried about like, oh, you're going to put it on these other networks. I'm not going to get to watch the games. It's not the same anymore. They're not playing the same things. They might not play the smaller schools. It's like, no, they're still going to play like the local regional schools. Like the Big Ten is probably still going to play the MAC. People are talking about how they might lose the ACC challenge in basketball. It's like the ACC might not exist in 5 years. What are you talking about? Losing the ACC basketball challenge, that might not be a thing. You might have the SEC challenge, though, with the Big Ten, which will kind of just take its place. But if the SEC adds all those like ACC schools and they stay in Florida, and are they going to add every single one? Because like at some point, if like UCF keeps adding more alums and they're getting more viewership, and the Big Ten adds UCF and they're able to pay them more money, wouldn't they have a chance to overcome the SEC, where now you have Miami and Florida State all splitting recruits? Or you add whatever Florida teams that's not there, and you're going to give them more money to just pile in and add a ton of recruits. Like that's what's happening with UCLA and USC now, where they're taking all the West Coast recruits and they're like, yeah, we're actually in a big boy conference now. And it's kind of been pissing off the Pac-12 schools, where even their commissioners like just throwing out stuff like, oh yeah, they're going to really regret leaving us behind. It's like, not so far, man. It seems like they're just taking the best of what you guys had to offer. Now the rest of your schools are begging to join the Big Ten. And if they get left behind, I don't know what happens. Like if the SEC, I feel like they could have made that next jump. But ESPN, I don't think wants to pay more money because they don't think they have it. And they're kind of just stuck now waiting. And how long are they going to wait? I don't even know. Like, I'm trying to think, like, what would be their next move if all these teams go? Do they just keep adding? I guess it's a 10-year deal with ESPN. The Big Ten's going to be up in 6 or 7 years, which they're locked in already. So the SEC one is right before the ACC one's up. What if the SEC and ACC both implode because the Big Ten's making way more money than them? Because they have the 3 major networks bidding for their big schools. Right?
I think at some point the NCAA would step in and try to police some of it so that it doesn't get to be where, like if you're using an NFL comparison, like the NFC teams that are represented on Fox get so much more of whatever revenue, whatever extra bonuses than the CBS AFC games.
I think they already lost that lawsuit, though, in the 80s, which is what started this entire thing. They were trying to tell Oklahoma or someone that they couldn't be on TV more than one time a year. And there's no way the NCAA can interrupt the TV deals. The only leverage they have is because they own the NCAA tournament, that they might try to step in. But realistically, if the Big Ten's like, hey, you're going to do what we tell you to do, or you're going to lose your golden goose because I'm going to take some of your biggest schools and pull them out and just have a Big Ten NCAA tournament. And like Is the NCAA tournament still going to be watched? Probably, but it's going to be like a bunch of Cinderella schools, right? Because like the Big Ten could say like, yeah, we're just going to have our own tournament. Sorry, NCAA, and the NCAA's all their money comes from the tournament, where they need it. They didn't get involved in football because of that issue in the 80s with TV deals, and everything was all in on basketball because that's what ESPN told them it was, right? And I've said it before. My theory is that ESPN liked doing basketball more because it's easier for them to have their equipment indoors, temperature regulated. They don't have to worry about like the Pac-12 where they're rolling out these crappy cameras and streaming it from a van from 2003 and putting it out the first week of 2022. That's what the Pac-12 network has been. And it's like for basketball, they just put the high-def cameras in the stadium. Their crew basically does nothing. They come in and do the broadcast and then they leave. And some of them, they weren't even in the stadium. They were just doing it from the booth. So of course they wanted basketball to be the best, right? It's easier for them to work in. They don't want to be outside in the snow, having dudes run cameras and then the guy running like the sky cam. They don't really have that for basketball. I mean, I guess some of them have like some type of sky cam, but I would assume it's on the walk thing on top. I don't know what the heck it's called. The catwalk type thing or whatever it is up there. But that's my thing. I want to see. I don't think the NCAA is going to get in the way because they don't want to lose basketball. And if the Big Ten's like, we're getting most of our money from football, we just want to keep the NCAA tournament the same. And we have UCLA and Indiana and Michigan State and Ohio State. I think the NCAA is going to be like, okay, that's fine. That's fine with us, guys. You keep doing what you're doing. And then, like I think the MAC, was it the MAC? One of the smaller conferences said they were asked their commissioner, like one of their days. I want to say it's the MAC, but I could be wrong. And they were asked about the expansion, and they were kind of like, we don't care. We hope that they keep scheduling us in non-conference because we need the money. For some of our schools need that money to survive from the big TV paydays. We're not doing home and homes, but like, for Western Michigan to go to Michigan's football stadium and get paid to take a beating, or hell, like upset Pitt, like that's a big deal for their program in terms of recruiting, getting the money that if the big conference breaks away, they're not going to get. And they don't have a preseason, right? So I don't think the big conferences are going to stop scheduling them because this is their preseason is basically what it comes down to. It makes sense for Florida State to play Duquesne before they play LSU. And I think it definitely hurts LSU to not have a warm-up game. Now, whether LSU loses to Florida State or they win, like I don't know if that really has that big of an impact, but it's definitely going to impact the players, their preparation in that opening game. I think they're going to come out flat compared to Florida State. I really do. I don't know if Florida State's going to have the talent or whatever to keep up with them, but I think that's going to make an impact. And I think going forward, you're going to see more of that. You're going to see less of, hey, let's see what happens. I think you're going to get some of them where it's like, hey, you are going to get Nebraska and Northwestern week 1. Are they going to put Michigan and Penn State at week 1? Hell no, they would never do that. But they might put some other random Big Ten teams that haven't won in a while week 1 and tell them, like, suck it up. It could be worse. You could be playing on Friday. Remember when we used to do that Friday game? I think there's only one this year. And then they're like crying, like, I saw a stat where it's like Penn State has opened on the road in the Big Ten. Like, they've only had a home opener like 4 out of the last 15 years. And I'm like, I'm hearing about this now? Shouldn't you guys have been complaining about this 10 years ago when you're never opening at home? Like, to me, that's not a coincidence. But if it's taking you 20 years to say anything, then maybe you deserve to have all those away openers, right? And then they had a stat where it was like Ohio State and Michigan were like the exact opposite. And I'm like, yeah, because they're probably complaining about it all the time. Could you imagine? Like, Ohio State's guy's constantly in the news complaining about stuff. You really don't think he would be complaining if he had a bunch of away games? Meanwhile, Penn State's like, no, we'll take it. Whatever. Is that check in the mail? That's how I'm going to end the show. Is that check in the mail? Because that's what I need, baby. So thanks for listening. We got some stuff coming up. Football is underway, and we'll see you next week.